Uber app?
Yes.
I reached in, I grabbed my clock, and ching. And
I'm not a killer, and I know that I have killed.
This is Jason Dalton. He is accused of killing 6 innocent people in the small town of Kalamazoo. Right now, he is telling the detectives how the Uber app took control over his mind and body.
It was red when I first started.
Okay.
I switched from red to black.
Okay.
When it's in that black mode,
Yeah.
it literally has control of you.
Under app's influence, Dalton went on one of the most bizarre killing spree in human history.
Hello, I need a ambulance. Please hurry up. Somebody fire shots.
Been about 9-10 gunshots right outside our apartment complex.
We need someone here.
If you guys only knew,
Okay.
it would blow your mind.
It was 4:21 in the afternoon, and Jason Dalton was ready to pick his first Uber drive for the day. He just started driving Uber because he wanted some extra side money so he could take his family to vacation.
Uber had just come to the Kalamazoo area, and he decided that was a way to make some extra money.
To raise money for a vacation.
When Dalton headed out to collect Uber fares that day in his silver Chevy Equinox, he took the family dog, Mia, with him. The very first passenger of the day, a college student, refused to ride because of the dog. But then, at around 4 p.m., our driver picked up a local guy named Matt Mellon who didn't care about Mia.
Matt was one of the first of many people whose life would be affected by Jason Dalton that day.
So far, everything seemed pretty normal. He received a phone call from his son. They talked briefly, and then he hung up the phone.
He did receive a telephone call, and he took it over the Bluetooth speaker. It was one of his children.
At that moment, the whole universe changed in an instant.
Then, out of nowhere, it was like he was dealing with a completely different person.
That's when he slammed the gas pedal, and then boom, we were off.
The phone from his son, the one that seemed to trigger Dalton, would become a subject of intense speculation later on. Whatever the real trigger was, Dalton's actions took a chaotic turn. He veered into the lane, meant for oncoming traffic, ignored a stop sign, and forcefully brushed against a Ford Taurus. Oddly, he continued as if nothing had occurred.
I was pleading for him to stop at this point, because it was like, you just hit that car, and he's like, I didn't hit any car.
But Dalton didn't hit the brakes. He sped past more traffic lights and kept veering onto the opposite side of the road. In the rear, Mia hunkered down on the floor, concealing herself. Strangely, Dalton remained outwardly composed, as if nothing extraordinary was taking place. At that point, they had already missed the right turn, and Mellon began gesturing towards different houses, claiming he needed to go there. He was pointing to random houses to make the driver slow down.
And I was like, oh, there's my friend's house, there's my friend's house, there's my friend's house.
Finally, Jason stepped on the brakes and let Dalton get out. At the same time, Casey Black and her husband were outside their house on the corner of Iroquois Trail, having a smoke and savoring the good weather. Suddenly, amidst the sharp screeching of Dalton's brakes and gas pedal, they witnessed Mellon spill out from Dalton's car.
The silver Chevy Equinox came screeching to a halt, and a door flew open, and this guy does a tumble roll out of the car.
Black dialed 911, detailing a silver Chevy SUV and an Uber driver ejecting a passenger. However, she doubted they fully grasped the gravity of what she'd witnessed.
I see this driver, dark, heavy-rimmed glasses, crazy gray hair. He looked very agitated.
Meanwhile, Mellon also dialed 911 while on his way to fetch his car down the road.
911.
I was just in the car with my Uber driver. He was leaving in and out of lanes. He sideswiped the car and
Hey, what kind of car is it?
Chevy Equinox.
Did you want to talk to an officer, or you just want me to put out an alert over the radio?
I just wanted to report it because I don't want someone to get hurt.
Upon returning home, Mellon rang up his fiancée, and around 5:33 p.m., she issued a cautionary Facebook post for their buddies, flagging an Uber driver named Jason with his Uber picture. Once Mellon made his escape from the car, Jason Dalton raced back to his home. Upon arrival, he swiftly entered his residence, quenched his thirst with a refreshing glass of water, and then descended to the basement, where he began the ominous task of preparing his firearms, diligently loading up the magazines.
At that point, we know he had a Glock 19 9mm.
He had a Glock 9mm semi-automatic pistol all loaded up, and underneath his coat, he had on a bulletproof vest. Dalton was clearly preparing for something gruesome. Minutes later, he made his way back onto the Kalamazoo streets, and the terror would officially begin.
I remember so vivid. It's like one of our first warm days, maybe in the 40s, and the snow was melting. It was the break from the winter.
Around that time, Dalton Blackburn also got a message from his girlfriend Macy asking him to come to her place. He accepted, and she quickly called an Uber to come pick him up. Dalton accidentally went to the wrong place first, the Meadows Townhome's admin office instead of Dalton's place. Then, after some time, Dalton gave her a call. He saw her picture in the Uber app, so he thought he was picking her up.
He was calling me and telling me, saying I was giving him wrong directions and was getting upset with me and then had hung up on me. And I just kept texting and I was like, are you there yet?
Coincidentally, Dalton's guardian, Amy, happened to spot Dalton in his car when she went to check her mailbox. She didn't know he was there for Dalton, or she would have intervened. But what caught her attention was how visibly agitated he appeared. Meanwhile, Macy kept texting Dalton. At 5:40, she sent a message asking, "All good?" But there was no response from Dalton. At that very moment, he was making another round through the meadows. As he did, he noticed a 25-year-old Tiana Carruthers guiding 5 little children, one of them her own, toward the playground, right across the grass.
He saw Tiana and he approached her.
He just kept asking me that, are you Macy, are you mad? I said no. And I said it quite aggressively because it was like, you're driving crazy.
Dalton briefly drove away, leaving her behind, but he had other plans.
He speeds off after I said no. We continue to walk, but at the time I still have my eyes on him, just, paying attention.
He made a swift U-turn and returned. Remaining inside his car, he reached for his Glock semi-automatic and pointed it directly at Tiana through the driver's side window.
And I told the girls, run, no matter what, you run and do not come back. If I just keep moving, then he just continued to shoot.
Dalton knew he was in trouble. His only solution was to run away. In a rush, Dalton zoomed toward his parents' place. Not far from the meadows, he blasted through a red light, going nearly 80 miles per hour. While driving recklessly, he hit another car and committed hit and run.
Homestead County 911.
Hello. I needed an officer to come out. I was just involved in an accident where a guy ran a red light and hit me in the intersection.
Dalton stashed the damaged Chevy Equinox at his parents' place. He decided that he needed to change a vehicle, so he grabbed his wife's black Chevy HHR. The killing spree would continue in this car. In fact, it remarks the beginning of a much more gruesome act that will happen later on. His wife, Carol, later inquired about what had occurred to detectives, and she claimed he'd faced issues with the taxi service. He said that a taxi driver opened fire on him.
He was acting paranoid. He went into the house, retrieved a Taurus handgun, and tucked it in her waistband and said, you need to keep this on you.
Dalton hurriedly handed his wife a loaded gun, warning her that she and the kids couldn't return to work or school. When she inquired about the reason, Dalton cryptically answered that when she saw the news, she'd understand it was connected to him. Although this raised a lot of suspicion in her, Carol did as instructed. After parting ways with his wife and kids at his parents' place, Dalton made his way to the family residence. There, he left a Glock he used to shoot Tiana, took some other things, and flew from the scene. As he departed, Dalton had a backup tucked away in his coat pocket, a Walther P99 9mm semi-automatic pistol. He realized he required a functional firearm because his mission wasn't over, not nearly. The worst was only yet to come. Then, as if nothing happened, he began again taking Uber rides. During this time, none of the riders suspected anything unusual about his actions, despite the fact that he had recently been involved in 2 high-speed accidents and fired a hail of bullets at a stranger. At 8:02, he swung by Keith Black's place near Western Michigan University and gave him a lift downtown. Black, sitting shotgun, engaged in light conversation. During the same hour, another passenger vividly recalled Dalton jamming along to the radio. The clock ticked to 9:21 when he picked up a group outside Fairfield Inn, right next to Cracker Barrel. He chauffeured the trio to the beer exchange downtown. However, there was a hiccup with his app. It refused to cooperate, and the fare didn't go through smoothly. Yet Dalton remained surprisingly nonchalant about the glitch, as if it were no big deal. He carried on with his job, as though nothing had gone awry and nothing would. Then, in a matter of seconds, all would change and terror would again take place. Tyler Smith was only 17. Tyler and his dad shared a passion for cars, but they were also looking for something they could get in business together. At 10 p.m., they went to a car dealership called Sealy Kia. Alongside them was Tyler's girlfriend, Alexis. They stepped out of the vehicle to examine a blue Ford pickup truck. conveniently positioned just outside the closed dealership. Meanwhile, Alexis wasn't really interested in cars, and she remained in the back seat of their Range Rover, which was parked alongside the pickup, its engine humming and lights turned on. Dalton steps into the scene, navigates through the parking area, and pulls up right in front of the dealership offices. Later, in the interrogation room, Dalton said that he came into the dealership because he wanted to see the black BMW. He then heads toward the father and son, passing by the Range Rover, seemingly unaware of Alexis. It's not until he's almost reached the Smiths that they finally spot him. He inquired about what they were looking at, Alexis later recounted. They spun around. "We're checking out." That's all they managed to say, because he swiftly took his firearm and began firing. Their eyes widened in shock. They raised their hands, uttering, "What's going on?" before collapsing. That's when I crouched down behind the seat. Alexis was scared to death, and she just closed her eyes and hoped Dalton wouldn't see her. Based on an account from some other witness who was passing by during the assault, it's been reported that even after the father and son went down, Dalton kept on firing at them.
Hi, we just drove by the Kia. What road are we on? 94 Business, and a guy just shot some people in the parking lot.
Okay. All right. Did you hear shots fired? Is that?
Yeah, that's what made us look, and there were two guys laying on the ground and one guy pointing a gun at them.
All right.
After patiently waiting for approximately 90 seconds, she tilted the front seat, searching for Dalton. She then exited the vehicle and cautiously inched her way towards her boyfriend, who lay motionless on his back. Then, with tears in her eyes, she called 911.
I don't know where he came from. He came from over here and he was like yeah, it's right here.
At that point, Dalton had vanished into the unknown. Something urged him, pushing him to a different destination. He had more things he had to do. Somewhere else, 4 women in their 60s, Mary Lou Nye, Mary Jo Nye, Dorothy Brown, and Barbara Hawthorne, along with 14-year-old Abigail Kopf, were going out to hang out together. They gathered for a pleasant dinner at Cracker Barrel and later drove together to catch a Chinese acrobatics show on campus. Fast forward to a little past 10 p.m., they found themselves back in the Cracker Barrel parking lot. This brief stop was solely to split into 2 groups for their journeys home. At that moment, as fate would have it, Jason Dalton approached them on foot. 4 of them squeezed into one car, while the 5th, Mary Lou Nye, got into another. The first time Dalton explained what happened here, he could only recall the thundering sound of gunshots. But later, he recollected more, revealing a deeply disturbing detail. He approached a woman in a white van and asked her for $1 to make America great again. When she declined, he aimed and fired at her head. As he was about to escape, he suddenly heard screams from the other car, prompting him to fire at them as well. Dalton chillingly detailed the order in which he carried out these acts. First the driver, followed by the rear seat passenger on the driver's side, then the front seat passenger, and finally, the rear seat passenger behind her. The police swiftly obtained surveillance footage from Cracker Barrel. Though not as sharp as the Sealy footage, it was sufficient to establish that the shooter was most likely the same person. However, Dalton still wasn't over and would later continue his madness spree. Following the shootings, he made his way back to his family home, covering a journey of 16 miles. At around 11:20, his neighbor, Jim Block, heard 4 shotgun blasts from Dalton's property. However, Dalton defied any recognizable rules or patterns of shooting sprees. He later clarified that the shots Block had heard were merely him firing into the garden shed with a shotgun. Even at that moment, he couldn't fathom why he had carried out this peculiar act. Soon after, he resumed his journey, stepping into the Chevy HHR and vanishing into the night. While he left the shotgun behind, the Walther 9mm that had already been used in the shooting of 7 people now held 20 fresh rounds. The strangest part of this bizarre night was that after Dalton's gruesome rampage, which left 6 people dead and triggered a county-wide manhunt, he casually went back to picking up Uber passengers. It was as if he hadn't just committed those horrifying acts, and he continued to ferry people to and from downtown Kalamazoo's bars for a few bucks, just like any other night. And so, if nothing had even happened, he continued picking up Uber drives. Meanwhile, there was Derek, a law student hailing from Indianapolis, concluding his evening at Bell's eccentric cafe. Earlier that day, he had made the trip with his wife and in-laws to witness his wife's stepbrother's jam band perform. Despite the late hour, their hotel was just a few blocks away, and walking seemed like a reasonable option. That was until one of the hostesses shared some unsettling news. A dangerous shooter was on the loose. While their worry was mild, caution prevailed, and they decided to order an Uber for the sake of safety. Derek grabbed his phone, and soon enough, their ride was en route. Jason in a Chevy Equinox. However, a twist awaited. The driver called to let them know he was only 5 minutes away, and by the way, he wasn't driving a Chevy Equinox after all. They should be on the lookout for a black HHR instead. At precisely 12:12 a.m., Jason Dalton arrived. Derek occupied the front seat, sitting beside Dalton. His father-in-law took the seat behind him, his wife in the middle, and Sherry, his father-in-law's wife, sat behind Dalton. Just before the journey commenced, Sherry had a word of advice for her husband, urging him, "Hey, don't say anything." She had a hunch that he might, and, as expected, he couldn't resist. "Are you aware there's an active shooter situation?" he inquired of Dalton. Dalton acknowledged that he was indeed aware. The exchange felt slightly awkward to Derek, so he decided to add a touch of humor, asking, "You're not the shooter, are you?" If only they knew who Dalton was, they wouldn't be so relaxed. "No," replied Dalton, his tone deadpan and curt. Derek, undeterred by the initial response, pressed further. "Are you sure?" "No, I'm just tired," Dalton explained, mentioning his 7-hour drive. After this, their conversation resumed its normalcy. A slightly intoxicated visitor from out of town and, unbeknownst to Derek, a fledgling serial killer with a loaded gun mere inches away. Derek shared, "I always strike up conversations with Uber drivers, because silence can be awkward." Nothing about the situation raised their suspicions. He drove very cautiously. It seemed as if Dalton was now a completely different person. Following that, Dalton picked up another ride, Mark Dunton with his 2 friends. Later, Dalton would also recount this ride in the interrogation room, as it also didn't end on the bright side. 3 friends were aware of the unsettling events in Kalamazoo that night, having absorbed the details from the police alert. They recognized that Dalton and his car matched the description, though it was a rather common vehicle. Plus, Dalton was an Uber driver. No one would think a shooter was moonlighting as a rideshare driver, right? They couldn't have been more wrong. During the ride, Dunton decided to address the elephant in the car. "You're not that person out there shooting people, are you?" Dalton seemed genuinely surprised by the question. "No way," he responded. "That's crazy. I'm not that person." Dalton, however, recalled the exchange too. He later told the police that he felt as if his passengers were taunting him. In his mind, he heard one of them ask, "Does he have a gun?" and "Are you going to shoot me?" Yet, he didn't harm them. He simply drove them to their destination and dropped them off, leaving the lingering question unanswered. It seems as if Dalton's anger has slowly been rising, and something would have to happen soon. Just a couple of blocks down, at a local bar, Mallory Lemieux, a Western Michigan student, was having a special night out with her mom and a group of friends. There were 7 girls and 7 mothers in their lively group. Her dad told her about what was going out in the news and warned her about a man shooting around in a Chevy HHR. However, as the night was reaching its end, Mallory ordered an Uber to pick her up. At 12:33 a.m., Lemieux's Uber request got accepted by the nearest driver, and her phone displayed the driver's info. Jason, driving a Chevy Equinox. As soon as Lemieux saw the word Chevy and Jason's face, panic set in. Swiftly, she canceled the ride and attempted to book another driver. Just a minute later, at 12:34, her new request was accepted. Jason, Chevy Equinox. Once more, she canceled the ride. On her Uber app, she tracked the car icon as it cruised right past her and her group, leaving them in disbelief. Meanwhile, Sergeant Harrison was on Dalton's tail as he made his way around the Wild Bull. He had no inkling that Dalton worked as an Uber driver. It was a tense situation, with concerns that he might be scouting for potential victims as he moved from one Kalamazoo night spot to another. Just after 12:37 a.m., Sergeant Harrison initiated a felony stop by switching on his police lights. Dalton promptly pulled over. 2 police cruisers lined up behind Dalton, and after a tense minute, they instructed the driver to place his hands outside the window. Dalton did as told. At precisely 12:38 a.m., Harrison, with his firearm drawn and backed by Sergeant Miller, who also had his gun ready, cautiously approached Dalton's vehicle, eventually seizing Dalton's wrists. It almost seemed as if Dalton surrendered too easily. "Got anything on you?" Miller inquired, but Dalton simply stared ahead with an empty expression. As Harrison conducted a pat-down, he discovered the firearm and announced, "Gun!" Then, Dalton was handcuffed, and Harrison escorted him to the police car. While Harrison continued searching Dalton, a fellow officer strolled by, giving Harrison a discreet fist bump. The message was relayed over the police radio. One individual detained, firearm found on the suspect. Jason Dalton later attempted to clarify why he surrendered without a struggle when the police arrested him. He explained that initially he reached for his gun on the right side when he was pulled over. However, something unusual happened with his phone. In one police interview, he mentioned that it beeped. while in another, he claimed that his app suddenly changed from black to red. At that very moment, he conveyed that he no longer felt like he was under guidance. As the report summarized, Dalton indicated that this was why he refrained from shooting the officer. 3 weeks after the shootings, Dalton would explain everything and give strange and paranormal reasons for all that happened.
It's the symbol that's on Uber. Could you bring my phone up to me so I can see it?
I have the Uber thing on here.
Can I see it, please? On Uber, when I clicked it, it went chink, and then there was like a double head that popped up. And I pressed that button, and that's where all the problems went after that. I've experienced the full body takeover. It literally has control of you. I would have never done any of these atrocities that have happened.
Dalton said the iPhone has incredible power. He explained that it allows you to drive at speeds over 100 miles per hour and even go through stop signs, getting you places quickly. But here's the creepy part. Dalton described the devil figure as a horned cowhead or something similar. It would give him an assignment, and it would take control of your entire body. It's like the iPhone had a mind of its own. Still, one important question remains. How can a normal family man all of a sudden turn into a gruesome monster going on a killing spree? Was the app really telling Dalton to kill others, or was this all an imagination in the sick mind of Jason Dalton? At this point, this is what we know. During the initial 16,678 days of Jason Dalton's life, he didn't harm anyone. However, on the following day, he took the lives of 6 people. Make sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Don't forget to turn on the notifications and leave a like to help the channel. Thank you for watching.